Welcome to Ceeview training. We'll spend the next 5 to 10 minutes talking about the Ceeview System Monitor. The System Monitor offers the classical server monitoring covering usage of resources like CPU, memory, and disk. And today's session covers the monitor's main functionality, as well as architecture and a hands-on demonstration of how to configure the monitor. As mentioned, the monitor supports monitoring of the following resources. CPU. Here we cover percentage usage and processor queue length for memory, physical memory usage, and page file usage. For disks, we monitor disk usage, disk free, disk queue length, disk latency, free and used inodes. And for shared disks, which is only supported for Windows platforms, we monitor disk usage and disk free. Though less commonly used, the monitor is also able to monitor offset and delay from an NTP server, and also have the ability to warn if the server has recently been rebooted. The monitor supports monitoring of most of the resources for both Windows and Linux servers, though a few is limited to one platform only. For instance, shared disk monitoring is specific for Windows servers, while inodes only apply to Linux servers. So, now that we know what the monitor provides, how does the system monitor go about monitoring CPU, memory, etc.? As for all Ceeview monitors, the monitor definition is created and maintained on the Ceeview server. That is this box here on the left-hand side. And it is normally maintained using the Ceeview UI, which typically runs in a web browser, down here in the left corner. So the UI in the web browser communicates with the server. Whenever the monitor is saved after being created or modified, the monitor is deployed or sent to all the server it applies to. This is illustrated by the red lines here. The system monitor exists on the Ceeview server, and it is configured to target a group of servers called newspapers. And when we save the monitor, it will automatically be deployed to all members of that group. In this case, it's 3 Windows servers or 3 servers running in this group: Ocean News, Cloud News, and Fake News. And if a server is added or removed from the group, the monitor will correspondingly be deployed to or removed from this server. And after having been deployed to a server, the monitor will run on a requested schedule, and on each execution will return requested metrics and alarms to the Ceeview server. This is represented by the green lines going from the group towards the Ceeview server. That's a small correction here. I did lie a little bit. Requested metrics like CPU usage, etc., they will be returned on each execution. However, alarms will only be returned if there is a change from the last execution, because there is no point in sending an alarm that the CPU threshold has been broken if we have already sent it. So we only send on change. This is in order to save network bandwidth, etc. Right. We are now finally ready to do some actual work. Our first demonstration will show how easy it is to create and use the system monitor. Well, at least if it's a fairly basic one. Right. So we are now about to configure a system monitor, and we'll configure this system monitor to monitor a set of servers. So let's first move to where we do all the configuration of infrastructure monitoring. Then we move down to monitors and we select the system monitor. The list of monitors you see on the left hand side is the list of all enabled monitors for the given Ceeview server. So today I thought I'd use an existing system monitor because that saves a little bit of time. However, if you want to create a new system monitor from scratch, you basically select the menu here and do a create like this. Fill in the information as we will go through in a minute's time. However, we'll stick with an existing monitor, the one here at the top. And we are going to make this, we're going to let this monitor continue to target a set of servers. That's what we call an asset group, a group of assets. And it's the group newspapers which we will use. If we have a look at this group, we see that it's this group here. We see that it consists of a set of servers. However, not all of them provide information from the system monitor. It's only one. And the reason for that is that in order for a system monitor to work, it requires that the server has an installed Ceeview agent. As this column here, asset type, says agent for this server. That means that there is a Ceeview agent running on it. Some monitor requires an agent running locally on the server to be monitored, others do not. We normally call the system type of monitors for a local only monitor, while monitors which can run remotely are called remote monitors. So we actually also have a remote system monitor, but that will not be part of this training. Right, so let's go back to the monitor. Let's open it. You need to specify a name for a system monitor. You can provide a description if you like to. There's also a possibility of adding tags to the monitor, so you can group together a set of objects. That's not important in this scenario. However, you need to decide whether the monitor should target a specific server, agent, or a group of servers, asset group. In this case, we use asset group, and we then need to provide the name of the asset group, i.e. newspapers, which we just looked at. You also need to provide a template asset that is one of the members in the chosen group, and we will use it in order to retrieve information which we can use to set sensible thresholds for the monitor. And finally, you decide what severity for the alarm if there is something wrong with executing the monitor itself. It's not related to the information you retrieve from the server, but you have problems retrieving information from the server. That is what this monitor error represents. So you can set it to whatever you want to, but normally it's fairly critical if the monitor can't execute, so let's leave it at critical. As we saw earlier, there is various kinds of resources you can monitor on the server: CPU and memory, disk, shared disk, and system. System consists of NTP server monitoring as well as server reboot monitoring. And for each type of resource, you can set the thresholds. Here for CPU usage, we have set them fairly low in order to generate some alarms. While, for instance, for page file, we have left them at more sensible levels. So let's go back to the CPU usage. Here we say that we want to get a not very severe or not a very severe alarm if the CPU usage goes over 5%. However, if it goes past 15%, we want it to be a critical alert. And we have severities alarms with severities in between minor and critical. It's major, and Ceeview will decide itself when to send a major alarm. So, but it will typically be if you end up in the middle between 5 and 15 somewhere. And this is the same for nearly all thresholds used by the system monitor. If you look at the disk section, it's much the same. The server will have retrieved from the template server the set of disks running on the machine. You can choose how to configure them. You can either use default configuration as set by this section here. And this section, the default configuration, can also be changed, obviously. So you can change the thresholds here by just clicking here. This, for instance. I'll set it back to what it was. The interesting columns here is metric, monitor, warning, and critical, in addition to the severity. Metric is whether the monitor should return metric series for the resource. Monitor is whether it should return alarms for the resource. And warning and critical is the thresholds. And that is about it. So for a disk, you can choose whether to monitor it using default, custom, or not to monitor it at all. If you create custom, or if you choose custom for a disk, you are led through a dialog down here which will allow you to create the custom configuration, which then will only apply to that disk. And you can enable or disable the monitoring of disks as you see required. The enable default monitoring for new disk applies to any disk which is discovered after the initial setup, and it typically you say that you want to use the default monitoring for any new disk. Share disks, much the same as the normal disk monitoring. It's not enabled now, but we can do that. So we add a share. Let's give it a name, DNS share. The server where the share is hosted. And the path of the share, as just share in this case, and an authentication record for authenticating against the server hosting the share. Having done this, we do a test to see whether we can talk with the server. That worked fine, so let's just create the disk share monitor ring. We'll just accept the default setting, the default configuration here. We are happy as long as disk usage is less than 90%. That works fine for us, and we'll just let's just disable this one. That's whether the disk is available for monitoring at all, and we don't care about disk free either. Well, it was already turned off, so that's fine. Okay, and finally we got the system monitoring section, which is either NTP server. We'll disable that just to show you how to do that, and reboot. So in this case, we'll reboot. We'll detect reboot of the server and set the severity to initially to critical. After 24 hours, we'll forget about the reboot. It will no longer give us an alarm. Right, let's do an update to save the monitor. It's now saved to the server and deployed out to any agent running in the given asset group. So let's go and have a look to see what we can see. Here we have the newspapers group. We see that the severity is set to 49. The health index is 49 with the worst severity major. That's the orange color. Same applies to Ocean News, the server in this newspapers group. However, it's not the system monitor that generates this severity, or the major severity, as the system monitor only gives us a minor severity. Let's see if we can find out what it is. Right, it's the URL monitor which generates that severity. So we don't actually care about the URL monitor this time. So we'll continue and focus on the system monitor. Let's have a look on all the reasons belonging to the to this asset group, and here we see the reasons for ocean use here. So we have the CPU usage is a problem, and we have a problem related to the memory usage. Both of them are categorized as minor, so it's not really that bad. Now that's one way of looking at the alerts for a server or for a server group. Another way is to have a look using the event summary. You can filter if you want to. Let's filter on ocean use. And here we see the same set of alarms. And the event summary is probably a better place to look for problems. But let's go to ocean use and have a little look at it. What do we see here? Well, we see at the bottom here the same section of alarms, and at the top here we have a set of boxes, one for each type of monitor. And here we see that the connectivity testing works fine for the server. We have some external monitoring, which we won't go into now, which has a slight problem. The system monitor returns, as we have already seen, some minor alarms, while the URL returns a major alarm, or one or more alarms. In addition to looking at the alarms for the specific monitors, which we can do like this, we just click on the system monitor, and then we get a chart showing us the development and health for this asset monitored by the system monitor. But in addition, we can look at the metrics for the server. And as we are only interested in the system monitor, let's filter a little bit, and let's say we want to look at CPU usage, and what else could be of interest there? Memory usage. And we like to look at it in single graphs. So here we get the development of CPU usage. It's been fairly stable, a peak here, and the same for the memory usage. Pretty stable, all of it. So probably, or not probably, we should definitely have had a higher threshold for the CPU usage, and probably also for memory usage. This concludes today's presentation of Ceeview System Monitor. Feel free to contact us for further information regarding System Monitor or any other part of Ceeview. And please let us know if there are other features in Ceeview you'd like us to cover through Ceeview training. Bye for now.